I'll get started. Yeah, it's really, really nice to see everyone today. And as I said, today is about autism and anxiety. But first, I just thought I'd explain what Spectrum Gaming is, because not everyone here is part of our community. So Spectrum Gaming is a community set up by autistic adults, by autistic adults for autistic young people. One of the reasons for this is we know how difficult being autistic can be sometimes, but it often feels like autism is blamed and you're told that you should struggle because you're autistic, when actually that isn't true. And a lot of the struggles can come from lack of understanding or lack of support from other people. So we wanted to make a community which could help people to see that being autistic isn't actually a bad thing. Being autistic is okay. So in our space, everyone is autistic, and yeah, I just think that's really cool. The slides look a bit dodgy when it's changing. Does it look okay, or is it flashing for you? It looks fine. It looks fine for me. No. But of course, our main focus is gaming. We don't talk about autism too much, I don't think. It's just a community of autistic people who like to play games together. So we have our Discord servers. We have a Minecraft server, which is open 24/7. At the top, you can see the Pokemon Castle, which my faction's built. At the minute, we are draining an ocean monument, which is taking hours and hours, but it's going to look really, really cool when it's finished. Just for the people in the chat, just because there's so many people messaging, unfortunately I can't reply to everyone's comments right now, but there will be sections for questions as we go in. I really hope that is okay. But you can also ask questions throughout, and some of our brilliant mods will be writing lists of copying and pasting questions onto a document so I can answer them all later on, if that makes sense. So yeah. We have a Minecraft server, we have live streams twice a week. On Mondays, I live stream the Minecraft server. On Thursdays, we're going to be doing random games. And yeah, we run face-to-face meetups too. In Manchester, we have a forest school, we have a gaming club that we go to. This picture here, I don't know if I'm pointing the right way, is a hike that we run, that we join from a group called the Cinewood Project every month. So yeah, that's basically Spectrum Gaming in a nutshell. It's so nice to see everyone. Yeah, unfortunately, we are currently closed to new members, but we will be open again soon. The reason for this is Spectrum Gaming has grown very, very quickly, and we just simply need more volunteers to make sure we can continue keeping Spectrum Gaming the way it is. So soon we will be open to new members again, and we will post on Facebook, YouTube, and other places when we are ready. In the meantime, as you can see right here, we have our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to keep updated with our videos. We have 2 really, really epic videos coming out in the next 2 weeks that I am so excited to show everyone. And we have Twitch as well, like I said, where we're going to be streaming twice a week. So how will this stream work? I will be talking through a few ideas, and there'll be time for questions at the end of each. If I don't reply to some questions, one of the moderators will create a list of things that are asked in between, and I'll reply to those at the end of the stream. If the stream has overrun, then I'll have all the questions and I'll make a separate video that answers the questions, if that makes sense. Final rule, only young people are allowed to ask questions. If you are a parent or a professional, you can go anywhere to go on an anxiety course or learn more about it. But young people never really get the chance, so this is only for young people to ask questions and yeah, talk about things. I hope that's okay. As I said, if there's any extra questions, I might have to answer them in another video. So why a live stream on autism and anxiety? The main reason is people often misunderstand anxiety in autistic people, and then people can make the wrong suggestions and give advice which isn't very helpful. This can include professionals and the services that are supposed to be the people who know a lot about autism, like about anxiety, like CAMs and GPs and people like that. And I think it's really unfair that it's autistic people who then face extra struggles because other people don't really understand. So that's why I wanted to make this live stream. And I wanted to start with an example of how people can get it wrong. So let me know if this is relatable to anyone here. So a common thing people talk about in our community is struggling to eat in the school dinner hall because people might find it overwhelming or too loud or other reasons. What happens next? The majority of the time, what a professional will say is, there's nothing to worry about. You must get used to sitting in the dinner hall. So first we'll make you sit in there for 5 minutes, and then the next day you'll do it for 10 minutes, and then increase the time again and again and again until you don't feel anxious anymore. That tends to be what a professional would say. Has anyone else experienced that? Let me know. But this often doesn't work, and the reason for this is, one reason people struggle is because the dinner hall is too loud. But if you're autistic and you have sensory differences, your sensory differences don't just randomly vanish or change over time. Those differences are part of autism. For example, I am oversensitive to lights. I am undersensitive to smell. Everyone has their different sensory profile. That isn't going to change. So if you're forced into a dinner hall which you find too loud, it doesn't help make it easier to cope with it, because you're always going to find it too loud. Instead, that can cause a lot of distress and pain and discomfort. The exact same if if the environment is really, really smelly or there's strong smells, your brain is not going to desensitize to that, so it will continue to be the same. So this little step-by-step thing does not help. So what happens is people put the blame on you, when actually it's the dinner hall that's the problem. It's the dinner hall that needs to change. Your sensitivities won't change. When can people join the community? We are going to put a post out on social media when applications are open again. I hope that's okay. A few people here who have selective mutism. It's nice to meet you. Today isn't focused on selective mutism, but I will mention it later on. I hope that's okay. And quite a few people relate to the dinner hall scenario. So that's why I wanted to share it. So what can be done instead? Instead, it's better to work together to understand why it is difficult. For example, if it is too loud, can you wear ear defenders can you wear ear defenders or headphones so you don't find the environment too loud? If it's too smelly, can you go at a less busy time of the day so there's not too many people eating at once with different food and different smells? Or do you have to go to the dinner hall at all? I find it really confusing. Sorry if people don't agree with this, by the way. But at school, people are told you must go and sit in the dinner hall. You must be in this very busy, loud, smelly environment. As an adult, we don't have dinner halls. When I was at work and I wanted to eat my lunch, I would go and sit outside. I would go and sit in the canteen when I knew it was quiet. There's no reason that you would have to stay in a loud, smelly place. It isn't. It doesn't relate to anything you need to do as an adult. Does that make sense? Hello everyone who's just tuned in. We're just getting into the juicy bits soon, so yeah, it's nice to see you. So let's say you've worked together, you have the ear defenders, you go at a time when it's still quiet, but you are still struggling to access the dinner hall. Then you go on to the next step, which is where you can then do that little thing where you try, 5 minutes, then 10 minutes. Thank you for all the nice comments, by the way. I'm sorry I'm not replying to everyone, but thank you very much. So you can try 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, and see if it would help you to feel less anxious about that setting. But the important thing here is it must be if it is something that you want to do. If it's not you who wants to do it, then you won't be motivated to give it a try, and it won't actually help with anxiety at all. For example, if you want to sit with your friends, first have the adaptations in place, then give it a try, rather than people just expecting you to be able to do it. At my school, only school dinners go to the hall and packed lunch stays in the classroom. Oh, that's interesting. Sometimes I find it comforting when people hug me. At school, I isolate myself from everyone else and the teachers understand, so they let me. Oh, it's really nice that they let you do that. That is cool. Eat my dinner in the school library. Oh, nice. And this is the result. If you're just told you have to go into the dinner hall, no matter how you feel about it, it can be too much of a step. So no matter how hard you try, it will be too overwhelming, and you won't be able to climb up to get to a point where you need to be. If you have those adaptations in place first, so having the ear defenders, having a quieter room, then it might still be a challenge to get used to being in a dinner hall, but the steps are much smaller, so you'll find it easier to do. I hope that makes sense. But this was just a brief example. I will be going through all of this in more detail. oh, that's gone backwards, not forwards. I will explain in more detail in a second. So today is not about sharing the perspective of you must desensitize and no matter how you feel, you can overcome this anxiety that you're experiencing. It's about sharing a different perspective to anxiety that understands actually most of the reasons for anxiety are other people and the environment. It's not you. Once you get the support in place for those things, that's when you can start to make progress with challenging anxiety, if that makes sense. But first, before I get into the juicy bits, are there any questions anyone has so far? You have ear defenders, yeah, cool. I have wireless headphones which I wear whenever I go outside, and I always have music on because that helps a lot with noises. So yeah, iPhone was really helpful. When I say I'm scared of loud noise, people scream on purpose. Oh, that's very mean. I'm very sorry that people do that. For my anxiety and autism, I make my own music and it takes the stress away. That is awesome. I love when people have their thing, or their interest, or their passion, and when you're focusing on that, it makes you forget about all the struggles and worries that you have in that moment. You know, for a lot of people, it is gaming. For a lot of people, it is going on a run, art, music, and it's really great when you discover those things. Have you ever overcome some of your anxieties? Yes, I have, and I have shared 2 examples in this presentation, so I'll come on to those later. I hope that's okay. Do you recommend any services for help? I think for me it depends. For me, I tried my local Healthy Young Minds and a few other local services that offered counselling and CBT. I had cognitive behavioural therapy at university as well. I didn't find any of that helpful. But when there's a local charity to me, if you're in Manchester, which is only available for adults, but it's called the Creative Living Centre. And there was an absolute brilliant person who worked there who I had one-to-ones with. And it was the very first time it felt like someone understood me and listened, and that helped me through a lot when I was really struggling a few years ago. So I think it depends. It's not just about the service, it's about the person as well. Because the person who worked there was absolutely incredible and brilliant, and I liked her a lot. Cool, I'll move on for now if that's okay. But as I said, a moderator will pick up extra questions. Cool. So, I want you to share 3 types of anxiety. There's not just one way that anxiety works. I see it as 3 different types. This is just my personal perspective, so feel free to share if you don't agree or if you have a different perspective, because that's really interesting to hear. And I wanted to go through each of these one by one, because this is what I use to make my personal plan for challenging anxiety. One more comment. I'm in secondary school now, but in my old primary school, it was nothing but stress because they would force me into loud singing assemblies and other things that are horrible. I'm very sorry about that. And it's strange because people are forced into those environments when you're at school, but then when you're an adult, you don't have to do those things anymore. You have more choice to what you can do. When Henry had fun in the woods today. Nice. Cool, so 3 types of anxiety. These are the names I've given them. People need to do better anxiety. That's number 1. Number 2 is people need to be better anxiety. And then number 3 is other anxiety, aka Shrek anxiety. And I promise, calling it Shrek anxiety will make sense when I get to it. Just bear with me for now if that's okay. It's just something I found really useful to explain it for me. So, number 1, people need to do better anxiety. I put a funny meme here that says, some people just need a high five in the face with a chair. And I've also put a disclaimer saying, we do not endorse high fiving people in the face with chairs. But do better anxiety is about other people doing more to make sure your anxiety isn't a barrier and making sure your needs are being met, if that makes sense. I'll explain in a bit more detail.
People have...
Video started straight away. Yeah, so the point here is... Sorry, that actually scared me for a second then. Oh my gosh, that's just broken me. People need to do better anxiety. I'm just going to play the video and then I'll talk afterwards. Sorry.
People have different skin colours, hair colours, eye colours and more in the exact same way. There are different ways our brains can be wired.
About 8% of people are boring, or you could say normal people. And about 20% have brains that are wired differently, which includes ADHD, dyslexia, and of course, autism.
Each brain type has its own unique positives and negatives, but the problem is, people can't see that our brains are wired differently, so autistic people are often misunderstood.
We don't want to fix autism. We want to fix Fortnite because it's dead. We want people to embrace our strengths and support us with our difficulties so we can become the best we can be.
People often don't take time to understand how our brains work, which can make life more difficult than it should be. Please read the video description to learn more about autism.
Yes, there were some brilliant people from Spectrum Gaming. And sorry, the links aren't in the video description because that is another Spectrum Gaming YouTube video, which you can see on our channel. But anyway, the point here is each type of brain has its own strengths and weaknesses. Whether you're autistic, whether you have ADHD, whether you are non-autistic or neurotypical. But the problem is the world is made for non-autistic people. So this means we don't have a level playing field. Even if you have, people believe in everyone being treated equally. But even if you're treated the same as others, that can then mean your needs aren't being met because you're being treated in a way that works for non-autistic people, not what works for you. So you can see the picture on the right. If you get the same support as other people, then there will be some people who that doesn't work for. And here's just a quote which I love from Chris from Artist in That Word, so I'm going to read it out. It says, "I'm autistic, which means everyone around me has a disorder that makes them say things they don't mean, not care about structure, fail to hyper-focus on singular important topics, have unreliable memories, drop weird hints, and creepily stare into my eyeballs. So why do people say you're the weird one? Because there's more of them than me." And that seems to be how it is a lot of the time, where, being neurotypical or non-autistic has its bad things and its negatives too. But then because there's less autistic people, people often say that it's you who's a bad thing when it isn't actually true, if that makes sense. So to reduce the do better anxiety, people need to make changes that meet the needs of autistic people. As you can see in the image, everyone needs different support in order to be able to see the baseball game. And it's the exact same with autism, where, some autistic people need more support to then be able to access things that other people do. Does that make sense? So, I wanted to share a few examples of these things that people can offer extra support for. One of them is sensory differences. If you watched the last live stream, you would have heard me say this already, but I'll quickly go over it again. So one trait of autism is having sensory differences. So there are 8 sensory systems. There's only 7 included on here, but there's actually 8. But you can be over or under sensitive to each of the senses. For example, sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, balance, and your sense of body awareness as well. And it's really, really helpful to have support in place for your individual sensory differences so environments work for you. These pictures here are the adaptations which I had when I was working at a local authority in the office. So I had my headphones all the time when I was working because we had a big, loud, open plan office which was very, very noisy and difficult to concentrate in. So I always had headphones on with music on to make it easier for me. Another thing is if I sit down for too long, I really, really struggle to concentrate because I'm undersensitive to balance, so I need lots and lots of movement. I have a bad back at the moment, so I'm not sat on it, but I normally sit on a gym ball instead, so I get lots of movement. But when I was in the office, I had lots and lots of movement breaks, so every 20 minutes I would get my notebook or clipboard or whatever I was working on and continue to walk while I was pacing up and down the office in a room full of people, but they had to deal with it because that's what I needed. The third thing is a move and sit cushion. Does anyone have one of these? It's like a pump-up cushion, but it sort of wobbles a bit when you sit on it. So whenever I was in one of the meeting rooms at the office, I would take this with me so that I could sit and concentrate and contribute to the meetings a bit more. The fourth thing is a hoodie, because I am oversensitive to light, so I find bright environments really, really, really uncomfortable. So when I was in the office, I usually had my hood up so that I could focus on the work I was doing rather than feeling really distracted by the lights. Of course, other people didn't have these adaptations. These are what worked for me as an individual person. And the final thing is sunglasses. When I was having a really, really bad day or I was really, really anxious, then I needed sunglasses to make things a bit less bright, to make it a bit easier. Oh, quite a few people have wobble cushions. Cool. Nice. The second point is about sensory regulation. Always a few comments. I like to lean back on my chair and spin because it's fun. Yeah, and that helps you regulate too if you struggle to sit still. It's blue and one side has plastic spikes. Yes. I like light, but I'm scared of the dark. Oh, thanks for sharing. I've got a section about the dark later on. I normally wear hoodies because my hair is a mess. Well, that works too. Alice is sitting on his wobble cloth cushion. Cool. Second point here is about sensory regulation. And I'll try and explain what this means. Let's say you are really, really, really anxious. This means that you have this thing called your arousal level. Some teens might find that word really, really funny. But basically that's about how awake or how tired you are during the day. So if you have a high sensory arousal level, that means you're really, really awake or really alert or really aware of what's happening around you. If you have a lower arousal level, that means you might be quite drowsy or tired or really struggle to concentrate. And everyone has a certain level which they are at during the day. And having sensory input is what helps make sure you are at the right arousal level for what you're trying to do. So if you want to sleep, you might want a weighted blanket, because that gives you deep pressure, that makes you feel much more calm and more organised, and that then makes it easier to go to sleep if you're really anxious or worried or really overexcited at bedtime. The second picture is a weighted backpack. When I used to go to work, I would wear a really, really heavy backpack when I was walking to the office, because the weight from a backpack is what then, it grounded me a bit, and that then made me feel calmer as well, which then made it easier when I went into the office. Lots of people have weighted blankets. I have one too. I've actually slept in it every day this week, and I love it so much. But yeah, I don't normally, but this week has been a stressful week, so I found it very nice. The third thing is having movement breaks. They also help you to stay regulated and stay at the right level for what you'd like to do. With sensory regulation, I always say it's as annoying but as necessary as brushing your teeth, because it's hard work and you really don't want to do it, but it's really, really helpful. So it's really great to do it as much as possible. In the office, I had lots of opportunities, but then at schools, if they don't understand autism very well or aren't willing to put extra support in place, that then means you might not be regulated, you might be at the wrong arousal level, so you might be really, really stressed or anxious, but then you don't get the support to make you feel calmer. Does that make sense? Yeah. A few comments. Weighted blankets are awesome. My mum bought one for herself, and I may or may not have stolen it. Cool. I basically have an exit card to have movement breaks. That is really, really helpful. It's really great that your school does that. But yeah, another reason why this is important is anxiety, stress, and sensory differences are all affected by your sensory arousal level. If you have a really, really high arousal level, and that then means you're overstressed, you're over anxious, you're overexcited, and then that can make you feel even more anxious than you should be. This also makes your sensory differences bigger as well. So if I'm quite anxious, everything's brighter, things around me are louder, and that sort of stuff happens. So having that sensory regulation, like using your weighted blanket, going out for a walk, having a stress break, is all really, really helpful, and which is why it's really important that people let you have them when you need it. Does that make sense? I don't know. One more example. So let's say I'm going to my running club I go to on Thursdays, and I've had a really good day, so I can go along and everything seems absolutely fine. Let's say one day I've been sat in a really, really boring meeting all day. I've been told I'm not allowed to have movement breaks or sit on my moving sit cushion, so I've been sat here like this. But then my body is telling me I need to move, and then I'm feeling really, really dysregulated, and then that means after my meeting is done, because I have a really high arousal level, it could be low depending on the individual, that then means I feel really, really anxious about running, because when you have that higher arousal level, you're overthinking things, and things just get really, really difficult. I hope that makes sense. Have you seen the toothbrushes that it's like a gum shield? I have not seen those. I created a whole tour world that I've been working on for 1 month on Minecraft. Cool. I have 2 pet baby seagulls that come to your roof all the time. That is really, really awesome. And did you like theme parks? I'll come on to theme parks because I've actually put about them in the presentation. Okay, next point is about the logical thinking style. As I said in my last live stream, I'll quickly touch on it again. Most autistic people are very logical. Hi, Alex. Most autistic people are very logical rather than sort of instinctive, which means we can often do better when you have lots of information and explanations for things. If you don't have enough information, it can feel like you've got a puzzle and you have one puzzle piece left to complete the puzzle and you can't find it anywhere. And it's that horrible feeling where you just really need to do it, but you can't. So that is often what it can feel like when you don't have the information you need in a certain situation. So again, for me at work, I did not attend meetings unless I had a written explanation in advance of what the meeting was for, what we were going to talk about in it, and how it was going to go. For a lot of non-autistic people, they could just go along and improvise when they got there, but for me to be able to contribute and give a lot of input, I needed to know in advance. Another point here is it's really helpful to always have a plan B or an escape option, because when you're trying to think a lot about how a situation might work, it's normal to think about the worst case scenarios and what will happen if things don't go well, and being worried about all the bad things that might happen. But if you have the plan B, the escape option, the thing you can do when things don't go well, that can then stop the overthinking about all the things that could happen. For example, when I was at work, I was allowed to leave a meeting at any time. So if it wasn't going well, I could just walk out. If you're in school, some people have a quiet room or a sensory room they can go to when they're stressed or overwhelmed. Most schools don't use it very well and use it when you're already upset rather than letting you use it whenever you feel like you need it yourself, which works much, much better. But yeah, just having a plan B can help with any anxiety you face as well. I think it's always useful to have a plan B. There are lots more examples, but if I continue, I'd be talking all day. So, for this step one, the do better anxiety. If you have an autism diagnosis, by law, your school or setting or services must put something in place to support you with these things. If there are things that are part of autism, like sensory differences, or your logical way of processing information, or needing sensory regulation, and that sensory input, like weighted blankets and things like that, by law, under the Equality Act 2010, schools must put adjustments in place to make that setting work for you. You know, when I was at my last job, my work made all the changes I suggested, not just because my boss was very nice, but because it's also required by law. And yeah, this exact same law applies to schools as well. Sometimes schools don't follow the law and don't often give you the support which you should have, but it is still the law, and yeah, you might have to fight to get the support, but you're entitled to it, if that makes sense. You don't actually need a diagnosis, it can just be suspected and you should be treated as if you have one. Yes, I'm not sure that is covered under the Equality Act, but regardless, I do think people should get the support they need based on their needs rather than a diagnosis. That would be really, really useful. Why can't I tell them what they need? Why do they decide that? They shouldn't be deciding that, but I think often, yeah, school is really, really frustrating because they don't always give you the support which you should. For example, I know when I was in school, I was never allowed to wear my hood up. I wasn't allowed to wear sunglasses in school. So when I was there, it made me feel really, really uncomfortable because I always have the bright flashing lights. But then as an adult, things tend to be taken more seriously. So I was allowed to have my hood up, I could have my sunglasses, I could have whatever worked for me. And it's really, really frustrating when that doesn't happen for people at schools. Yeah. It's covered, so the answer is it's covered in schools, it's code of practice. Not necessarily. So, by law, you're protected under the Equality Act if you have a diagnosis. In the SEND Code of Practice, it does say for each need you have, the school must put support in place to meet those needs, but you're only legally entitled to that if you have an education, health and care plan, and not everyone has one. If you apply for an education, health and care plan, people will assess your needs and write them down, and then for each need you have, by law, they should put some support in place to meet every need. But it's people who don't have a diagnosis, who don't have an HCP, who don't get that support. Anyway, sorry, that isn't relevant to young people. I'll move on. Young people's questions, please. Yeah, this slide is for young people. Sorry, I'm gonna stop. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, yeah. The next bit. Any questions so far about the do better anxiety before we move on to section 2? Any questions about that? I have a lot of help at school. I'm just worried. That is understandable. Yeah, there's a lot of people in Spectrum Gaming who do really struggle with school. I understand because it was really difficult for me. Yeah, I just feel a lot of empathy for everyone in that situation. Yeah, lots of messages. What happens if you are non-verbal and can't express what you need? Everyone expresses what we need, but in different ways. You can express what you need without words. You can see how someone's behaving, how they're acting. Everyone has a different communication method that works for them, and it's about understanding them as an individual. What do you do if you're getting bullied a lot? I've actually got a section on bullying in the next section, so I'm going to move on to it. I'll wait 30 seconds for any more questions, if that's okay. Does everything make sense so far? Please let me know if it doesn't. Should my school deny my ECP because I have learning difficulties? No, they should not. Yeah, again, this isn't relevant to many young people, but if you have an education health... When people apply for an education health and care plan, local authorities might often say that you're not entitled to one. The truth is you actually are, but they say that to sort of save money, because local authorities don't have much money at the moment. If you appeal their decision, the majority of the time it is overturned, and then people do get onto the next stage of an education, health and care plan. I can't access school right now because of my anxiety. I try HD, but I've not made it in yet this term. Well done for trying, but yeah, it is understandable. I'm hoping to explore some of the reasons why it might be difficult today. The kids are not a problem, the teachers are. What do I do then? I'm hoping I'm covering that too, but please let me know if I don't. Okay, I'll move on if that's okay. Moderators, please carry on collating questions if that's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, section 2. People need to be better anxiety. Oh, one more comment. I feel like some of the teachers at my school aren't very good at teaching us all. That's a shame. Yeah, okay. People need to be better anxiety. So, do better anxiety is where people need to make changes to the support that is offered. Be better anxiety is where people need to make changes to how they act towards you. So that is my video clip in this stream. No, it's not Dino. Be better anxiety is where people need to make changes to how they act towards you, rather than what they actually do. I'll try and explain what this means a little bit more. What usually happens is when you're in a difficult situation, let's say people aren't being very nice to you, or they're not being kind, or you're being bullied in school. Has this happened to anyone else in the chat right now, where people can respond by saying, you need to be more resilient, or I'm going to teach you some coping skills, or, you know, here are some coping strategies which you can do. Like a punching bag, which Little Wellbeing said. I don't have a punching bag. My main thing that I do when I'm stressed is listen to music and go out on a walk or a run. That's what I find really, really helpful. But has anyone ever been told this? If you're being bullied, you should learn to cope better and that sort of thing. Yeah. But what I always say, I think if someone is autistic, we are often resilient enough, and they don't see how much you actually have to go through in a normal day. So, you know, people have bullying, you might have lack of understanding or judgment from others. People might not understand why you behave in a different way because of your sensory differences. Schoolwork might be too easy, or it might not be explained properly. You might feel lonely or out of place because most people at your school aren't autistic, as an example. You might be in an unsuitable environment, even with adaptations in place to make the place more sensory friendly. It might still be difficult simply because there's too many people. There's so much people have to go through just to get through the day, but I actually think every autistic person who makes it into school, survives a school day, or even tries to go in despite all of this, has very, very high levels of resilience. So when people say you should learn to be more resilient, I personally think a lot of the time it's nonsense. Feel free to let me know if you disagree. Sorry, I can see lots of questions. I will come to them at the end, if that's okay. Just so I can get through everything on the slides. I hope that's alright. They are being written down, so I will come back to them at a later stage. Next slide. With these things, unfortunately, there is no law to help, but there are things people should do to help. For example, bullying. Bullying is very, very common. I was very badly bullied when I was at school, and I understand. Again, it's one of those things where people are less supportive when you're a young person than when you're an adult. When you're at work or at a group as an adult or something like that, and someone is bullying you, the change is instant. At my job, no bullying whatsoever was tolerated. It was stopped instantly. But then, why isn't it the same at school? It really, really should be. So my advice in this situation, every school and setting has an anti-bullying policy. And what usually happens is parents can write and complain and say what it is like to be bullied. But then if you feel able to, I think people take it much more seriously when it's a young person themselves that writes it. So if you're really struggling or things really aren't going well, then maybe get it in writing, write a letter about it. But don't just send it to teachers who might just say, as someone said before, boys will be boys and that sort of stuff. Above the school staff is the governing body, the school governors, who then oversee what the school does and how it runs. So if you write a letter and send it to the governing body, it's much more likely that they will take it seriously and change will happen based on what you said. Because they will make sure, or most should make sure, that teachers are actually doing what they should do when that happens. Yeah. My parents don't understand that gaming is my free space. I can do what I want to go to different worlds to escape my own. You can send them the last video we posted about why gaming is good. It has bad things too, of course, but yeah, gaming has great things too. More questions I'll come on to later. Yeah, another point here. We had bullying. The next one is when you have lack of understanding or judgment from others, or feeling lonely and out of place. I think one of the reasons for this is people simply don't talk about autism enough. And I've got a really great quote here. So the people who don't know about Harry Potter, I'm sure most people do. There's a bad guy called Voldemort, no one says his name. So I'll just read out this quote about Voldemort. It says, "Sir," said Harry, "I've been thinking, sir, even if a stone's gone, you know who." Then Dumbledore says, "Call him Voldemort, Harry. Always use a proper name for things. A favour name increases favour thing itself." It's very strange because you get your autism diagnosis and then often no one ever talks about it, and then it becomes this sort of, autism is not scary, it is normal. A lot of the population are autistic. 20% of the population is neurodivergent, but no one ever talks about it. So then autism becomes this thing that people become afraid of or quite worried about, simply because no one says the word. And with people not talking about it, people don't learn about it, and people are afraid of things that they don't understand. I think if people talked about autism more and started to be more open about it, there would be much more understanding, and people wouldn't have as much difficulty from lack of understanding or lack of judgment from other people. I know there's some people in this live chat right now where I've actually been to your schools and I've been the first person who's gone in and openly talks about autism, and it's very strange that it never happens. So yeah, one other suggestion, I said about the anti-bullying policy and writing a letter to governors. Another thing is seeing what your school or setting feels able to do to help make sure people do talk about autism or neurodiversity more. One thing I love is Neurodiversity Celebration Week. If you Google it, there's a website that has free assembly slides, PowerPoints for lessons and more that can help with that understanding. There's a great video called Amazing Things Happen. It isn't the best, but it is pretty cool. That talks openly about autism and helps people to understand. The final thing I wanted to share is something called The Umbrella Gang. So this is a comic about neurodiversity and about acceptance of people being different. I'm in it. But basically, what happened is the ADHD Foundation started to create this comic, and we had 4 characters which are based off real life people. The person on the right is actually a member of Spectrum Gaming, but Tony from the ADHD Foundation, the CEO, he is amazing. He sent me the script, and I loved it so much. I was desperate to be a part of it, so I just asked if I could. And the 4th character didn't have a real life person behind it yet. So even though they don't look like me, I mean not me, they have my name, and it has a picture of me at the back, because I love the comic so much. So I really, really recommend reading it. So someone says, I get so sad when I'm told I need to be more resilient at school, or get less behaviour points for resilience from my classmates. They don't struggle in the same way. I'm very, very sorry about that. That must be so difficult. Yeah, unfortunately I don't have a solution, but I understand how it feels, and I'm sure people here do as well. Richard says, I had a lesson on autism, but the teacher had no idea what she was talking about. Yeah, it's quite common, isn't it? Yeah, I find it very, very, very frustrating. I'm not sure if people were there that time, but there was a few members of Spectrum Gaming where I signed up to a random autism course and watched it, and it was really, really bad. So we watched it together, and then I sort of told them off at the end for all the misconceptions which we said. But it is very common that people talk about autism but don't do it in the right way, which is why I wanted to share these examples, because these are ones which I do think are quite good and I would recommend looking at. Yeah. The final point on this bit about being better is, unfortunately, some places will never work. Even with changes in place, as I said earlier, an environment might be too loud or too busy or too smelly, and it might not work for you as an individual. There could be too many people. The other point is there could be too much of a fight. You are legally entitled to some support. There's some support which schools write policies about and what they should be doing. But sometimes people really, really don't understand, and they might not be open to change. And sometimes it could be too much of a fight, but it's not actually worth it. So sometimes it's better to look at a completely different environment, or try a different school, or a different area which is better supportive of your needs. Because unfortunately, sometimes with some places, it just won't work, and that's the truth. As sad as that is. And it might not be worth the fighting that it takes to then still not get the support. I'm MIA, by the way. Hi, MIA. Final point I wanted to make here. This is just my idea as well. Feel free to tell me if you don't agree. But I think there are 3 types of people in the world when it comes to understanding autism. There's the people who get it. There's the people who naturally understand autism and naturally put the support in place that work for you. My boss at my last job was a perfect example of this. I need a drink, 1 second. She was naturally really supportive and understanding and listened to what I needed. When I made a suggestion about how I could be supported better, she did it instantly, and it was brilliant. There's the people who really try their best, who might get things wrong, they might do things that make situations more difficult, but they try their best and they are open to listening and learning and to more guidance. They are the giga chads that we need, who you need to find and stick with, and they're the best people to support you. Then you have a third group, the poo-poo heads. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them, and they're not very good. These are the people, I'm sure you've met them, it's the people who always think they are right and they're doing things in the right way, and your view is wrong, and they're not open to listening and changing, doing things differently. Unfortunately, there are lots and lots of people like this. I've worked in schools where young people have really struggled. I've shared their thoughts and views on what can help, and then people will say, we don't have the time, we can't do this, that's not the right approach, it's not going to work. And there's lots of people like that. For me, what I've learned over time, the poo-poo heads, they're a waste of time. As frustrating as it is, they're not going to listen, they're not going to change, they're not going to learn. You can remind them of the law and what they should be doing, and what you're entitled to, but then they're still just feel like incompatible. I don't know, Yeah, there's just, I just thought I'd make you aware there are people like that and they're not very pog. But yeah, you mean stubborn? Yeah, people can be quite stubborn. Yeah, does that make sense? There's just like some environments don't work. There's some people who just won't change, and it's really awful. Yeah. This feels like PSHCE. Do we call people poo-poo-heads in PSHCE? Yeah, cool. Okay, any questions so far? The next section will be about other anxiety, aka Shrek anxiety. I love that this is all about other people making changes, not the autistic person having to change. Thank you. This bit actually isn't about other people. The Shrek anxiety is about yourself and what you can do. But the other two should be considered first, if that makes sense. Yeah, any questions? I'll give it a minute. Sometimes my neighbours do things to offend me and I've told them it's mean and they still hit me with footballs on purpose. Oh, I'm very, very sorry about that. People who don't want to get it because it inconveniences them. Yes, that's the one. People who hate the people who don't want to get it. Where can I read the comic? While I'm waiting for questions, I'll quickly get a link. So there's 3 episodes, 3 volumes to the comic. The first one is about the introduction to neurodiversity. The second one is about the transition to secondary school. And I've forgotten what the third one is. Even 1 minute, that's not very good. Why is it called Shrek anxiety? I'll come on to that. Any questions? I'll give you 30 more seconds. This isn't an ogre emoji. I did my boy Shrek 30. Brilliant. Poor Shrek, eh? 15 more seconds. There's no Shrek counter. Do you think everyone should be accepted and people who are autistic not be offended? Do you mind if I ask what you mean, Julie? I'm not quite sure I get the question. I don't understand the second half, I don't think. I think people who are nasty are usually having a hard time and take it out on others. Sometimes that is definitely true, but it's not always true. There's always things that people could be done differently. Sometimes, one thing I've learned, I won't get into it. I'll start ranting all day. We'll leave it there. Do I like broccoli? Broccoli's okay. I'm not that keen on it. Yeah, cool. Okay, I'll move on. Where have the beans, Andy? They're coming soon. Wait for it. Shrek anxiety. Let's talk about it. Shrek anxiety or other anxiety. I call it the rest. It's all Shrek anxiety. Again, feel free to disagree with me. Andy, what the heck does Shrek anxiety mean? Well, there is a quote at the start of Shrek where Shrek says, "They judge me before they even know me. That's why I'm better off alone." What you'll know about Shrek is, in the past, he has had lots of difficult experiences with other people. You have judged him, they've tried to kill him with pitchforks and more. As a result of that, he assumes everyone he's going to come across is the same, and they're going to judge him and see him as a bad person. So he's given up on having friends and being around other people. That's why he lives in a swamp on his own. He thinks there's no point trying to find others because it's pointless. He's tried and he's failed, so I'm going to stay in the swamp as a lonely little Shrek boy. Yes, it's sad. Now, question, who is this? Does anyone know who this is? This is one of the people who changed Shrek's view. But who is it? Do you think autistic people should be accepted? 100%, definitely. Yeah. Anyone know who this is? Me. No, it's not you, Liam. Sorry. Yes, the classic case of people chasing me with pitchforks and saying I'm autistic. Okay, no one's replied. It is actually... Oh, yes, there you go. It's Donkey. This is Donkey when he's had the happily ever after potion that makes him turn into a stallion, a noble steed. But yeah, it's Donkey. What happens with Donkey? He is part of the start of a Shrek movie, where Shrek says, I'm not even going to try and do the accent, "Little donkey, take a look at me, what am I? Really tall? No, I'm an ogre! You know, grab your torch and pitchfork. Doesn't that bother you? Nope. Really? 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 Man, I like you. What's your name? Shrek. So what's happened here? Donkey hasn't judged Shrek. He thinks Shrek is pretty cool. But because Shrek has struggled so much with his previous experiences, he's already assuming Donkey is like the others. And he's worried about wanting to talk to someone new in case of having the same negative experience. Does that make sense? Even though Donkey was different to others, because of Shrek's previous bad experiences, he assumed Donkey was the same. But over time, his perspective changed. As you get into Shrek 2, he makes friends. As you get onto the later films, he has a full squad of mates and people he likes to spend time around. So that shows how he felt at the time was irrational. He felt like he would never be able to make friends and get on with others, but it wasn't actually true. And he eventually learned that over time. I'm going backwards. The thing here, this is about irrational anxiety. It's where you get in a point where you feel like something's really, really bad, or your worry is telling you something is really, really negative, even when it's actually not. So this means when you better understand what this irrational anxiety is and know that it's irrational, that's when you can learn to overcome it if you want to, if that makes sense. If Shrek had learned that not everyone is the same, as he did during the first Shrek film, that's what then enabled him to develop more friendships and build them over time. Tell me if I might be waffling a little bit. I just thought I'd include Shrek because it's pretty fun. Let me know if it doesn't make sense. But I want to talk about one of the most common types of the Shrek anxiety, which is phobias. I hope that's okay. So, question. Is anyone here scared of spiders? As a random example. Anyone scared of spiders? I wonder how big the delay is. It might be a big delay. Sorry. Yes, there's a few people who are scared of spiders. It makes sense. Thank you. Oh, it's gone backwards again. Lots of people who are scared of spiders. Don't look at that picture. What about the dark? Who is scared of the dark? I know a few people said they are earlier on. A few people said they're scared of the dark. What about kittens? Is anyone scared of kittens? Anyone? Let me know if you are. I'm pretty sure I have Shrek anxiety. Oh, that's a shame, Liam. Only when I'm going to sleep, scared of the dark. Yes. A little bit, but my dad has a tarantula. Oh, cool. Kittens, anyone? A few people said we are scared of kittens. Oh, you might think we're talking about the dark. I'm not sure. Anyway, the point here is people can have a phobia of absolutely anything, no matter how scary, unscary or harmless it is. Some people have phobias of cheese. Some people have phobias of beards. If you're in Spectrum Gaming, I have a phobia of beans. It makes no sense. They're completely harmless, but then people have phobias of them anyway. There's one thing that makes something you are scared of a phobia. Does anyone know what that is? What is the one thing that makes something you are scared of a phobia? I'll give it a bit of time because I know there's a delay. Oh no, everyone's talking about beans. Phobia sus among us. Caveman instinct, that's a good one, Nathan, thank you. People, the outdoors. Epic. Mr. Pandit, hey, hope you're okay. Okay, cool. No one's answering it. It's irrational. Yes! Sorry if I say your name wrong. She Brennan, got it. It's irrational. Camilla, it's completely irrational. It is a phobia. Yes. Phobias do not make sense. They are irrational. Let's look at spider phobia again. Spiders are completely harmless in the UK, but still 72% of people report being scared of spiders. No one has ever died from a spider in the UK. They're friendly little things. They're more scared of humans than you are of them. There's absolutely nothing to be afraid of. But still, even though everyone knows they are harmless, your worry can still get really big when you see a spider, and people become really, really, really scared, even though there is actually nothing to be afraid of. and it's a normal thing to experience when it comes to phobias. It's the same when I see beans. If I can smell beans and go near, if I touch a bean, it literally makes me want to be sick. It makes no sense because they're harmless. Oh, I need to get rid of that picture, sorry. So what can you do about this? This is where someone asked if I have any examples. Well, quite a while ago, I used to have a really, really irrational fear of heights. I once wanted to go on a music therapy course. It was very expensive. I was at university, I didn't have much money, but I paid £90 to go to a music therapy course. I went to a place called the Royal Northern College of Music to go on this course, and when I went in, it had those stairs that have the gaps between. Do you know which ones I mean? Where you can you can see through the gaps, and you can see right through. Yeah. Anyway, even though I paid £90 to go on this course, I could not make it up the stairs to go and attend the course because there were gaps, and it triggered my fear of heights. Even though those stairs were completely harmless, I could not have fit through the gap under the stairs. There was nothing to be afraid of. It was perfectly safe. But my anxiety, my phobia stopped me from being able to go up the stairs. Couldn't you die from a heart attack from pure fear if you see a spider? You could, but it's never happened. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I want to use my fear of heights as an example because I've overcome it now. There's a 3-step process for overcoming any irrational anxiety. The first one is, no, there isn't actually anything to be afraid of. The slides keep going dodgy. They're 1 in 3, okay, let me move back. So this comes on to Luke's point, which when he asked, do I like theme parks? In the past, I did not go on any rides on theme parks because I was so scared of heights. But the goal I wanted to work towards, the reason why I wanted to overcome my fear of heights, was because I wanted to go on some big roller coasters. That sounds really silly, but that's what it is. So I looked at the facts around roller coasters. So on a ride, 1 in 300 million people have a chance of a fatal injury on a ride in every year. That means rides are very, 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 very safe. I am 30 times more likely to be struck by lightning than have a fatal injury from a roller coaster. But I spend all of my time outside. I love going through the woods and being in nature. So the phobia makes no sense. The first step for overcoming a phobia is knowing the phobia is nonsense. The steps have holes in between them. I made sure there's no holes in between the 3 steps, so that is very funny. Thank you. Yeah. Step 2, make sure nothing triggers your phobia. Can I have a certificate? Yes, Mirage, I can send certificates out if people want some. I can't put anyone's individual names on them, but I can make one for everyone if you'd like one. But yeah. Step 2, make sure nothing triggers your phobia. Let's say, yeah, if someone tried to make me challenge my fear of heights before I was ready, it would have made my fear of heights worse. If someone tried to force me up the stairs or force me up a bridge, that would put me in meltdown mode. It would activate my fight, flight, fright response, and then it would make my fear of heights worse. It's like if someone has a spider phobia and you throw a spider in my face. That makes a spider phobia even worse and makes things even more difficult. So yeah, definitely don't recommend that. The starting point to overcoming a fear of heights is to not be near any heights you are uncomfortable with. Make sure there's no pressure to face your fear, or there's nothing that triggers your fear. Once that's happened, then you can take the little steps to challenge your fear a bit at a time, to prove to your worry there isn't actually anything to be afraid of. So you know there's nothing to be scared of. You get rid of the pressure to make sure you're not as anxious around it, and that is when you make the small steps. That is actually step 3, but I've put it at the bottom because I'm silly. Oh no, I've put it here as well. So step 3 is taking small steps to prove there's nothing to worry about at your own pace. It has to be at your own pace, because if someone makes you try and do steps that are too big or that you're not comfortable with, like I said, that could activate meltdown mode and make your phobia worse. So here's what I did to overcome my fear of heights. There is a local arcade club near me called Berry Arcade Club. It's Europe's biggest arcade. I loved it so much. But I was worried about the stairs because it was curvy stairs that went up in a spiral. But I could manage those stairs. So what I did, even though I felt anxious every time I went up them, I went to Berry Arcade Club for the day and spent a few hours going up the stairs, down again, up the stairs, down again. I wasn't so anxious I was in meltdown mode, but I did feel uncomfortable. When I kept doing that, it reduced my anxiety a little bit at a time, every single time. And I kept doing it until I wasn't worried on the stairs anymore. And my worry of going up those stairs had completely gone. Went on to the next step, which was crossing bridges. So I started with this low bridge, which is at a park in Whitefield. And I started going across it over and over again to reduce my fear of it. And then I went on to a bigger bridge. And then a bigger bridge than that, and kept doing that until I had no anxiety to run those particular places. Once I got to a really, really high one, which is in Prestwich, near the Same Yet pub in Simister, just as evidence that I remember the journey very, very well, that's when I could move on to rides. This is a ride I went on at Heaton Park at their fun fair, and went on it over and over again until I wasn't scared of it anymore. Then moved on to bigger ones. As evidence that this works, if anyone's here, I think Joel's here. You could let people know. 18 months ago was our first forest school session, and I was forced to climb a tree. I climbed up, and I was so scared I couldn't get down, and I got stuck in the tree. Joel, feel free to confirm that. Right now, when I go to forest school, everyone knows I can climb up the trees and get down very, very easily and get very, very high in them because this method worked and it's reduced my fear of heights a lot. How can I be less scared of nighttime? I've got this as a little example as well. I overcome my fears by taking them out of the house and removing them. Nice. Yeah, Joe says it's true. Red Chick says it's true as well. They've seen me in trees when I used to get stuck in them. It works very well. Here's another example. Fear of the dark. It is the exact same step-by-step process for any phobia or irrational anxiety. The first thing is knowing it's irrational. A fear of the dark is irrational. There's nothing bad that's going to happen when you are in the dark. When you're in your bed at night, for example. Of course, something could happen, but it's very, 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 very unlikely. Not to a point that you should ever be worried about that. So step one is knowing that fear of the dark is irrational and you can overcome it. The second step is making sure there is nothing at all that triggers your phobia or fear of the dark. So you start with no pressure and no demands. So why not try sleeping, for example, with the lights on, or staying with the lights on for a while. And then that's when you move on to step 3, having those very, very small steps. So you could do it one way where you start with all your lights are in your bedroom. Then you can start with a side lamp. Then you can start with a night light and do these little steps. But those steps could be too big because it is a big fear to overcome. So another thing that can work for fear of the dark is having a dimmer switch. So you can start with a very, very strong light, and then every day you can turn it down a very, very, very tiny bit, so that you feel a tiny bit uncomfortable, but it's not enough to start you from going to sleep. And then as that happens and the brightness slowly gets lower and lower and lower, you get more used to it and your fear of the dark will reduce over time. It's the exact same process. The important thing for overcoming it is it's you who's in charge of how bright the lights go and turn it down at a pace that works for you. Does that make sense? 'Cause if the step is too big, then you won't be able to challenge your anxiety because it'll be too much for you and it'd likely make it worse. Yeah, and like I said, that applies to every anxiety. But the important thing, as I'll say later, doing step 1 and step 2 is really important first. So making sure you have the right support in place and your anxiety is reduced enough about other things will then make it easier to overcome that fear. If I had my fear of heights when I was in the school environment, when I was in school, I was very, very badly bullied. So I was really, really anxious going into school every day. I had so much anxiety around different things that overcoming my fear of heights would be impossible because my anxiety was already heightened. Does that make sense? So it's basically the more support you have in place, the better you feel, the less anxious you are in general, the smaller these steps are. So it's really helpful to get the steps as small as possible so you can then make the steps to overcome your fear. I hope that makes sense. Top tip, repeat small steps challenges until they are boring. Yes, exactly. A few people here talked about selective mutism. The process is exactly the same. The first thing to know is selective mutism, a fear of talking, is irrational. People aren't going to be you know, it's not, nothing bad is going to happen if you do talk in a certain environment. There is nothing to be afraid of. It's just your anxiety telling you otherwise. Once you know that, the next step is making sure there's no pressure or no demand. With selective mutism, that is about making sure people around you don't give you the expectation to talk. You can have adaptations in place to make things easier for you. Make sure people around you understand selective mutism. They know that pressuring you to talk makes it worse. Once people know these things and put adaptations in place, and then you feel completely comfortable in an environment because you know people understand you and won't expect you to talk, that's when your anxiety could be low enough to start doing the little small steps with overcoming the fear of talking. And it's the exact same thing where you could start with something really simple or easy. It could be, you know, writing a letter to someone for the first time. That could be a first step for you. It could be waving at someone. It's coming up with your own step to reduce your anxiety a little bit at a time. Once you're comfortable with one step, move on to the next one. So you can start with waving at someone. You could then go on to writing a letter to someone. It could then just be saying hello to someone. It's making those steps in a way that works for you. But with selective mutism, it is very, very difficult because so many people don't understand it. So having professional advice or people who understand it really, really well is really, really helpful for overcoming selective mutism and reducing your fear of talking. Just because so many people don't understand it, and it's such a shame. Yeah. Let me know if that makes sense or doesn't. Yeah. When I worked for a local authority a few months ago, I worked with a lot of teenagers who had selective mutism. The people who got over their fear of talking the most, or got to a place where they felt like selective mutism wasn't impacting on their life, were the people where schools would listen to feedback and suggestions which I gave. I gave advice to make sure people weren't pressured to speak or do things they're uncomfortable with. And those people then made a lot of progress with reducing the fear of talking. In other environments, people still set talking targets or asked people to put their hands up when they needed to go to the toilet or write on a whiteboard. All of these things then caused more anxiety, which meant people struggled to make progress with it. Yeah. That was it on the phobias section. We'll have questions soon, but first I want to mention a final point on Shrek anxiety. Because there isn't just irrational anxiety, there is also normal anxiety. There's anxiety that everyone experiences. So most of the time, people experience anxiety when they are doing something new or something different. Most people feel worried when they are unsure about their plans. Some people feel worried if they have a lot of what if questions, if they have to do a performance. I was very worried before I was doing this talk because I was very anxious about how it was going to go. That's a normal way to feel when you are performing something. And of course it's normal to worry if something scary is happening. If a creeper suddenly teleports behind you in your bedroom and you hear a fizzing noise behind you and you're not scared, you're superhuman. Because it's normal to feel worried when something scary is happening. It's a normal feeling everyone experiences. But the important point here, if I move back a second, all of these times you feel worry, the important thing is knowing when the worry is telling you something important that you need to take seriously, or if it's talking nonsense. So this is another quote from Shrek where Donkey says, "Uh-oh, you know with you it's always me, me, me. Well, guess what? Now it's my turn, so you just shut up and pay attention." The way I see this type of anxiety, you're better off seeing it as a separate character. Like, for me, at the start of Shrek is the person who always said things are never going to go well, people are always going to hate me, I'm never going to be able to spend time around other people. That was nonsense. So I see my worry as Shrek. Sometimes what he says makes sense. You know, I don't know, what do you say that makes sense? He doesn't say very much, does he? But let's pretend he does. Sometimes things that Shrek says make sense. Sometimes it's absolute nonsense. So when you're worried about something, it's up to you to decide whether they're saying something that's useful and worth listening to, or whether it is nonsense and you need to just tell him to shut up. Like Donkey tells Shrek to shut up sometimes when he's talking nonsense. I feel like I've explained that very, very badly. Let's say, for example, I don't know. Let's say if I hear very loud cars outside, I feel very worried, and they're driving really, really fast. That worry is telling me that I should be worried because cars are going really fast. I think at that time it would be a good option to not stand near the road just in case, to make sure I'm safe. For this talk today, I was feeling very, very worried about doing it because I wasn't sure how it was going to go. But I really, really wanted to do it because I really wanted to share this with everyone. So I told Shrek, the name I give my worry, to shut up, and then I did it anyway. Yeah. So when you have these anxieties that are irrational, or the other anxieties, like when you're doing something new or you're unsure of what's going to happen, give it a name. You can call it Stinky if you want. Here's the Stinky Gorilla. You can call it Stinky, you can call it Shrek, you can call it Poo Poo Head. Whenever you have those worries that don't make sense, whether it's a phobia, whether it's because you're doing something new, the best way to describe it is like an annoying, do you know those, this is going to sound really bad, do you know those people who act like they're a know-it-all and they always think they're right and they're always telling you what to do and giving advice? Sometimes what they're saying is useful and you can listen to it. But it's that know-it-all who also likes to talk absolute rubbish sometimes. So sometimes you should listen to what it says. Sometimes you should just tell it to shut up, ignore them, and do what they say anyway. Or pretend you're listening, but completely ignore it. As I wrote here, as long as you know, sometimes your worry is talking nonsense. Sometimes you need to feel the worry, yeet it out the window. Write the worry on a piece of paper. I'm going to miss the window. I'm not going to throw it out the window because that would be strange. Yeet it out the window, do what you want with it. And then do the thing that is making you feel worried anyway, to prove to your neighbour, or Shrek, or the parrot, or Stinky, that there isn't actually anything to be afraid of. Does that section make sense? But that's only for the other anxiety. As I said, there's 3 types which should all be supported differently. So yeah, we're almost at the end now. I've got one final thing I wanted to go through, which is how to combine all of this together to challenge anxiety in a way that I think works quite well. But first, are there any questions so far? Kobe. Oh, I recorded this yesterday, but I'm annoyed because it didn't show my microphone. But I was playing Bed Wars with Milo and Tom. Tom, I don't know if you're watching. And then he said, "How old are you, Andy?" So I told him I'm 24. And then he said, "I can't believe a 24-year-old man says dude." But I'm just strange. I say yeet. I say poggers. I'm just a strange old man. But yeah, I recorded it, but it didn't record my voice, which is quite sad. But there you go. How do I share this video when it's finished? It will be on the Spectrum Gaming YouTube channel, so you can just click on videos when it should come up. What you do is shutdowns are automatic. Do you want to ask a bit more about what you mean by that, Agnar? I mean, I'll come to that at the end, if that's okay. MIA has a question? I thought you were like 40. Yes. You're allowed to talk. Give you 20 more seconds. What do I do if I feel like everything is against me? I'm very sorry, that is a very, very big question. It's about you as an individual and what's going well and what isn't going well. I'm very sorry, I won't be able to answer that on stream, but if you're in Spectrum Gaming, feel free to message me and we can talk about it more. I hope that makes sense. We're allowed to talk, you don't control the community. Cheers, Jude. I'm at Crimson Farm, nice. Yeah. My son shuts down when he's overwhelmed and anxious. I'm very sorry, you're not allowed to ask questions. The questions are for young people. He's welcome to ask if he wants to. But the main thing is, if someone shuts down when they're overwhelmed and anxious, it's about getting the support in place before they feel anxious, before they feel overwhelmed, and before they get to that point. But yeah, sorry, I'm not answering anymore because it's not come from your son. I'm so sorry, that is really rude. But yeah, I did give a disclaimer at the start. Okay, final section, and then I'll come on to the final questions. How can you use what I have talked about today? Well, let's start by looking at the 3 types of anxiety page. As I said, there's the people who need to do better anxiety, the things which people by law should be doing to make sure your needs are being met. There's the people who need to be better anxiety. That's about people having more understanding and understanding you and your needs, and having a different approach that works for you as an individual. The third section is for other anxiety, the irrational anxiety, or the normal anxiety for when you're doing something new or you're going out of your comfort zone. So, personally, I use this as a step-by-step guide to knowing how to reduce anxiety for each situation that I'm in. So I'll go through this and let me know what you think of it. So, step 1. Is any of anxiety you're experiencing caused by unmet needs? This is the first thing you should be looking at. If the environment is too busy, too overwhelming, if they don't give good explanations, like, you know, showing you a video of a venue in advance or explaining what's going to happen while you're there, this is the first thing you should focus on for things to be fixed. Then you move on to step 2. This is about, can anything be done to make people more supportive and understanding? Do people at the place you're at understand autism? Do they understand your needs? Do they have a culture of acceptance where it's okay to be different, and things like that? Then the final point, once you've got as much support in place as possible, is this something you want to do? Does the thing that's causing you anxiety fit with what you would like? And then you can look at if you can take small steps to achieve what it is that you'd like to do. So that's it. That's a 3-step guide. Does that make sense? And I've got a couple of examples for it. So one practical example. Another phobia I used to have was a phobia of phone calls. And I'll use this in my 3-step guide as an example. So a few years back, I was really, really anxious about using my phone. I never phoned anyone ever unless it was someone I was comfortable talking to before I developed my phone call phobia, because I didn't struggle with those people. But by law, people must have made adjustments for this because I'm autistic and I was entitled to adjustments. So for a long time, I only used email and text and didn't do phone calls. There's some places that said they offered phone calls only. So I moaned on Twitter and said, I need adjustments, it doesn't work for me. So I got emails and texts from people and got things that worked for me rather than being expected to phone call when I wasn't able to do it at that time. Step 2. People need to be better. So then I explained to the people around me that I struggle with phone calls. I explained what this means and I shared some alternatives. Because of this, people pressured me less to use them. And because people weren't constantly phoning me and expected me to answer my phone, my anxiety wasn't being triggered. Like I said, if you throw a spider in my face of someone who has a spider phobia, that makes their phobia worse. Just like if you expect someone to talk who has selective mutism, that then makes your fear of talking worse, if they're not ready for that. The same with me. If people phoned, it made me really anxious. I avoided it and my worry got worse and worse over time. So I started with no expectation to answer my phone. Then after that, I used small steps to overcome my fear of talking on my phone. So I started with telling my friend, I'm going to phone you. Please don't answer my phone. I'm just going to phone and hang up. I kept doing it over and over again until I wasn't anxious about it anymore. The next step was me phoning him, him answering, me putting my phone down. Then it went on to me phoning him, saying hello, putting my phone down, and making these little steps a little bit at a time, until I got to a point where I don't have a fear of talking on my phone anymore. I still struggle with unexpected calls, and don't ever answer them, but once something is arranged in advance, I can happily talk to people on my phone if they do call me. Yeah, but the important point here is wanting to make those steps to overcome it. For about 3 years, I had a phobia of phone calls, but I had no reason to change it. I was perfectly happy with using text only and emails only. The thing that changed is I really, really wanted the job at a local authority, and I knew it would be much, much easier to do my job, and I would find it very helpful if I was able to call people and talk to people on the phone. Having that motivation or that reason was what then motivated me enough to take those small steps. So people might struggle with a phobia or, you know, social anxiety and things like that, but without a purpose or reason or motivation to want to overcome it, then people might not be able to, because the reason to do it isn't actually there. Yeah. So a final example I've got for today before questions is about school. Like I said, one of the difficulties is sometimes people just focus on the step 3 and taking those small steps to overcome anxiety without looking at the things before it, which often is very, very unhelpful and can make things very difficult because then your anxiety is too big to overcome it. So let's look at school. You've got the step of, yeah, like I said, the typical approach, what people can say. People, I know people in SG, Stretching Gaming, have experienced this before because they've told me about it. So what people say, regardless of support we put in place, people might say, on day 1, you can go in for an hour. Once you're used to that, on day 2, you're going for 2 hours. Then you can try the full morning on day 3. But it doesn't always work because you're missing the section 1 and the section 2. If the school environment is very, very smelly and you're sensitive to smell, going in for an hour isn't going to make it smell any different. So people need to go back to the beginning and start with the step-by-step process. So for me, step 1, these are just a few examples, there's much more to it, but I wanted to name a few. You can make sure the school environment meets your sensory needs. I think recently on the Spectrum Gaming Facebook page, I shared, it's called the Inclusive Activity Toolkit. Can anyone find it and post it in the chat? That would be helpful. It has a list of adaptations that indoor environments can do to make it more sensory friendly. You can send this to a school and see what we've put in place to help with it. Roberta says we had 2 schools try this with them. Yeah, it's quite common. Second bit, are things explained in a way that works for you? Are you given advance notice of what's going to happen? Is it clearly explained? Do you have a plan B for when things aren't going well? Do you have a quiet room you can go to, which you're allowed to use when you use it, rather than being forced to go there when you're having a meltdown or already at crisis point? Are you allowed to use it before you get to a point that you're too stressed? Step 2. Do people in your class understand autism? Do they embrace difference? Is it okay to be different at the school that you're in? If it's not, is there anything that the school is able to do to help with that, so that people do accept if you need a fidget toy when you're in class or you need movement breaks? What can the school do to make it a more accepting environment? Step 3, then, if your anxiety is reduced enough, if you've been out of school for a long time, even if it's the most perfect school with the most amazing support in place, because it's been a long time, you will still feel anxious about going to that new place, which is why you can then move on to step 3, which is those small steps to gradually make it easier. Once you have all the support in place first, to, stopping all the barriers and the things that cause anxiety, that's when that approach of having an hour in school, then 2 hours, then a morning, that's when that approach will actually work and can actually help. Does that make sense? The important thing with a step-by-step process, it will never be perfect. There's always going to be people who don't understand. There's always going to be difficulties of getting support and challenges. So I believe in not following it perfectly, but following it as much as possible. To increase your chances of reducing anxiety. So it's about doing it as much as possible. And that was the final point. And yeah, that was it. Thank you for your time. Questions? Anyone have any? There was a few on the document. There's just a couple here at the end. I did this in year 6, went in lots of times. I started secondary school last week. It's still hard to go in. Yeah, very sorry about that. My son doesn't trust teachers because they used to tell him off for shutting down and thought it was being stubborn. Yeah, I'm not going to start ranting about schools, but yeah, I think it is very, very frustrating at times. I think, yeah, okay, I won't get into it. Yeah, can I help with the ocean monument in Minecraft? Yes, of course you can. Everyone's allowed to help. Okay, cool. Questions. How to talk to parents if you're stressed and your anxiety is going through the roof. This was a question quite a lot earlier on. My response to this is I always find writing and texting much, much easier than talking directly about anxiety. Yeah, I have to put everything in writing because I do struggle with saying it out loud. So yeah, maybe just send a text or write a letter and pass it through to the room. That's what I used to do when I was talking to my mum when I was stressed about things. Yeah. Why is there not much help for autistic girls and more boys? Yeah, that's quite a common thing. I could be wrong in saying this. If there's any autistic girls in the chat, you will know better than me. But I think once you have a diagnosis, support should be quite similar. The difficulty is a lot of autistic girls struggle to get a diagnosis much more. And one reason for this is I always say there's two different ways people can sort of be autistic, if that makes sense. So some people are quite external or openly autistic. So you can see that someone is stimming, you know, flapping their hands, using stim toys, doing things that show that you're autistic, if that makes sense. But then other people can sort of keep it to themselves. So when I was in school, I struggled with the bright lights, but I made sure no one knew because I didn't want to appear out of place and tried my best to fit in. So I sat there through the discomfort and tried to make sure no one would know how uncomfortable I felt. So then you have the internal version where people keep it to themselves. Anyone can do either of those. But I think most autistic girls are more likely to sort of keep it to themselves and try to hide the difficulties, which means that unfortunately people will get less support. But then with boys, of course, boys can be internal as well. I was the same when I was at school, but then it's more likely that they aren't. I don't know what the reasons are for that. That's just my sort of observation. It could be wrong. Andy, do you have any other mental health difficulties other than autism and anxiety? Well, of course, I'm autistic. I don't think I meet the criteria for anxiety anymore. 3 or 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and severe depression. But then I learned a lot about what they mean and what I can do to help with that. So I still have days and times when I feel anxious, but that's because anxiety isn't part of autism. Anxiety is a part of being human. Everyone has anxiety that they experience at some times when they're doing some things. Like I said, I was anxious before doing this live stream. But in general, I don't experience as much anxiety as I used to. The same with depression. I used to struggle with it a lot. And some days I have days where I feel depressed. But as a whole, I don't think I meet the criteria for depression anymore. Does that make sense? Before the stream ends, can you search on Google coldest place in the universe? I already know the answer, so there's no point. My son really wanted to tap at school, but because people were saying about him not talking, he didn't want to bring attention to himself. I'm very sorry about that. Thank you. We got our school to change for me. I went back into class after a long time in the hall. Cams did CBT, which is a bit like you've been saying. Yeah. Thank you, Gabs. How did you get to the point where you got diagnosed? Well, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 20. I think the reason for this is, of course, I had a sort of internal presentation, so I made it look like everything was going well. And I got good grades at school as well, so I wasn't seen as a problem. It was only when I was at university, when I really started to struggle and felt overwhelmed by everything, that was when I sort of went into crisis, and that's when I was diagnosed with severe anxiety, severe depression, and got an awesome diagnosis too. And that was when my journey to understanding autism started. So, yeah. Questions. I've answered those ones. Oh, that was all the questions that people have listed. Was there any other questions people wanted to ask? If I've missed it, please ask again if that's okay, because I might have just, missed it by accident. I'll give 2 minutes for questions, answer those, then leave the stream there, if that is okay. Masking. Yes. Do you know when you'll be accepting members? Well, first we need to open an advert out for new volunteers. Me and Bex are writing the volunteer recruitment pack, but it does take a very long time to write, so it'll be done as soon as possible. Once that goes out, we'll be accepting new volunteers. Once we are recruited, that's when we'll be able to open for new members. Sorry we don't have an exact time on that, but it will be as soon as possible, and I'll post on all social media when we can accept new members. Is it worth trying to educate the poo-poo heads? I think often not. I think for me it's a waste of time. But I guess it's different as an adult. As an adult, if I don't get on with someone, if they're being a poo-poo head, I don't need to associate with them. With Spectrum Gaming, we have partnerships with lots of amazing people. We work with lots of incredible organisations. If I meet with an individual or an organisation that isn't open to hearing about views from our young people and their values and what's important to our community, I'm not wasting my time talking to them and trying to educate them and improve their understanding. There's times where I've worked with local authorities to give insight, and then nothing changes over years and years. So there's no point. It's as much as you really wish you could make changes. Sometimes it's really, really not worth the energy. That's what I've learned as an adult. Yeah, I'm interested in Spectrum gaming for my son. He only has one friend, and I think a peer group would really help him. When we are open for more members, he is more than welcome to give it a try. How do we make an account for Spectrum Gaming? If you apply to join, we will send the instructions over. But as I said, they're not open yet, unfortunately. Isn't people who head yuck heads? Yes. Did you know that in the coldest place in the universe, helium is a liquid, whereas every other substance is a solid? Cool. Thanks, Andy. Oh, thanks for the kind words, everyone. If it is your teachers or the local authority that are poo-poo heads, what do you do? Well, of course, it's a difficult question. I know me and you have spoken about it before. But yeah, sometimes, it's with local authorities, remind them of the law and what you're entitled to, show them the same code of practice and the Equality Act. Even if people aren't willing to listen and open and learn and be reflective, the law backs you up a lot of the time, so you can remind them of that. But then again, for me, it's as difficult as it is. Sometimes some teachers and schools and places won't work, so you can just avoid them. Sorry, that isn't very helpful. What is our Twitch? I'll quickly get a link to our Twitch and then leave it there, if that's okay. Oh, wait. I don't think that's our Twitch, Joe, but thanks. That's it. Okay, awesome. Well, yeah. I don't think there's any more questions. So it has been very, very nice to see everyone. I hope you found this somewhat useful. And yeah. Wait, before we go. Topics. Does anyone want another live stream like this in the future? If so, what topic do you think would be useful? Local authorities seem to follow their own policy, not the law. Yes, that often happens, but then you can appeal their decisions, and then usually the tribunal will follow the actual law, which can help. I'll tell you what, people just message me for extra topics, if that's okay. People in our community, you can message me on Discord. If you're a parent who's watching, we have a Facebook group called Spectrum Gaming, which you can join, and just let me know in there. Yeah, I hope that's okay. Nice to see everyone, and goodbye.